Imagine a family so surrounded by mystery that their name became a magnet for conspiracy theories and a synonym for hidden power. For many people, that family is the Rothschilds, bankers of kings, symbols of influence, the dynasty in the shadows that supposedly controls the world. But what is history, and what is myth? That's what we're going to uncover today. You're watching Let's Talk About Money. If you want to understand how real financial power is built, not in memes, but in history, subscribe now so you don't miss our next stories. Our journey starts in 1744, in Frankfurt, in a Jewish ghetto called the Judengasse. There, in a cramped, overcrowded street where thousands of people lived packed into a few hundred meters, a boy named Meyer Amschel Rothschild was born. On the facade of his family's house, there was a red shield. In German, Rot means red, and Schild means shield. From that simple image, over time, the family name Rothschild was born. Life in the ghetto was harsh. Jews had limited rights, could not own land freely, and were confined to certain professions. But they also built networks, knowledge, and resilience. Meyer Amschel grew up in this environment. As a teenager, he moved to Hanover, where he got a position in the banking house of Samuel Oppenheimer. These banks did not exist to give mortgages or credit cards. They existed for one main purpose: to hold and move the money of nobles and princes. At that time, the Holy Roman Empire was a mosaic of nearly 1,800 territories. Each one had its own ruler, its own taxes, and often its own coins. There were old coins from the Middle Ages still circulating, new issues from local princes, and all kinds of foreign currency. In that chaos, Meyer Amschel learned a crucial skill: how to value coins, exchange them, and move money across borders. He also learned something even more powerful: the mechanics of bonds. Bonds were debt sliced into tradable pieces, sold to investors in exchange for interest. States used them to finance wars, construction, and their own lifestyles. Bankers structured these bonds, placed them with clients, and earned commissions. By the time Meyer returned to Frankfurt in the 1760s, he had everything he needed: technical knowledge, experience with nobles, and a contact book that was starting to get interesting. He opened his own business, specializing in rare coins and antiquities. It looked like a niche hobby. In reality, it was a perfect excuse to deal with rich collectors, nobles, and princes. One of them would change his life: William IX of Hesse-Kassel, heir to one of the richest territories in the region. According to the story, one of Meyer's first transactions was the purchase of an ancient coin from William. The prince needed some cash, supposedly for something as mundane as buying beer, and Meyer provided it. It was a small operation, but the start of a long relationship. William wasn't just any client. He was heir to a powerful state, with huge tax revenues and a business model as brutal as it was profitable, renting out his mercenary army to other powers. Thanks to this, his fortune was estimated in tens of millions of florins, a staggering amount at the time. In 1769, Meyer Amschel Rothschild officially hired William as his banker. In the language of the time, he became a Hofjude, a trusted financial intermediary of a prince. From there, the Rothschild story changed scale. Meyer and his wife Gödel had many children. Only a fraction survived, as infant mortality was high. But 5 sons would become central to the dynasty: Amschel, Solomon, Nathan, Karl, and James. While raising a large family, Meyer expanded his activities. He collected rare coins and antiquities, handled taxes and estates for William, and started receiving deposits and making loans for other clients. Around 1798, the capital of the Rothschild firm was already substantial, and the family had clearly crossed the line from coin dealers to serious bankers. At the same time, history was accelerating. Meyer's son Nathan Rothschild moved to Manchester, England, just as the Industrial Revolution was gaining momentum. He went there to trade textiles. But very soon, another business, more dangerous and more profitable, would present itself: war finance. And the Rothschilds were about to step onto the stage of European history.
In 1803, Britain declared war on France, and the Napoleonic Wars began. It was part of a much longer struggle between France and Britain, often called the Second Hundred Years' War. Not continuous fighting for a century, but recurring conflict for dominance. Napoleon wanted to reshape Europe under his rule and his version of Republican ideals. Britain wanted to stop him and preserve its own power. In Frankfurt, Mayer continued managing the enormous fortune of William of Hesse-Kassel, while extending loans to other states. If a German principality needed money, there was a good chance it would, directly or indirectly, deal with Rothschild money. The model was simple and powerful. The Rothschilds created bonds, placed them with investors, handled the logistics of moving gold and payments, and charged commissions at each step. Then war pushed everything to the limit. When French troops advanced, William had to flee into exile. His lands and palaces were at risk of being looted, and with them his financial assets. Myths later claimed that Mayer personally buried his client's treasure in the garden to protect it from the French. Historians like Niall Ferguson suggest a more mundane reality. Much of the value was moved or protected through more conventional and less heroic means. Meanwhile, in England, Nathan Rothschild abandoned textiles and moved fully into finance. He opened his own house in London just when Napoleon imposed the Continental Blockade, trying to isolate Britain economically. Blockades and wars are terrible for most people. For some bankers and smugglers, they are opportunities. The Rothschild brothers used their linguistic skills and family network to move money and financial instruments across borders, often using coded correspondence. James Rothschild in Paris and Nathan in London built a system to buy and sell bills of exchange that were heavily discounted under the blockade, and then redeemed them elsewhere at full value. The margins on some of these operations were huge. Later, when France invaded Spain, Britain sent the Duke of Wellington to support the resistance. Financing armies across the continent required enormous logistical and financial coordination. Rothschild money and Rothschild networks played a crucial role in moving funds, currency, and credit to where they were needed. By the end of the Napoleonic Wars, the British government and several other states, including Russia and Prussia, owed very large sums to the Rothschilds. And that's where one of the most famous myths in financial history appears. According to popular legend, after the decisive Battle of Waterloo in 1815, Nathan Rothschild supposedly received the news of Napoleon's defeat before anyone else in London. The story claims he went to the stock exchange, began selling in panic, caused everyone to copy him, crashed the market, and then secretly bought everything back at a discount, becoming unimaginably rich in a single move. It's a brilliant story. It's also almost certainly not true. Many versions of this tale come from hostile or openly anti-Semitic authors in the 19th century, who used the Rothschilds as the perfect villains in narratives about hidden Jewish power. Over time, the story has been repeated, exaggerated, and turned into proof that the family controlled everything. Did the Rothschilds profit from war? Absolutely. They earned significant money financing states, moving funds, and handling bonds. Did they need a superhuman spy network and a dramatic stock exchange scam to get rich? History suggests they did not. The real power of the Rothschilds wasn't a single genius trick. It was a system. 5 brothers in 5 major cities: Frankfurt, Vienna, London, Naples, Paris, connected by a private courier network, sharing information faster than most rivals, and coordinating capital on a continental scale. They weren't just lending to kings. They were helping to build something new, an international market for public debt. If this kind of financial history helps you see the present more clearly, consider subscribing to Let's Talk About Money and leaving a like. It's free, and it tells us to keep making deep dives like this one. The Rothschild model standardized how states issued bonds, allowed investors in one country to buy debt from another, and helped integrate Europe financially. At the same time, the family invested heavily in railroads, mines, infrastructure, and even luxury goods like French wine. They weren't just bankers. They became industrial investors, shaping parts of the 19th century economy. And yet, as history would show, no dynasty, no matter how powerful, is untouchable.
The 20th century brought shocks that no balance sheet could fully resist. The Rothschild houses in Naples and Frankfurt had already declined or closed before World War I. The Vienna branch survived the fall of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Great Depression, but a far darker threat was coming. With the rise of Nazism in Germany and fascism in parts of Europe, Jewish families, including the Rothschilds, became direct targets. Some members of the family managed to escape to Britain or the United States. Others were not so fortunate. In Austria, Louis Rothschild was arrested when he tried to flee. The Nazis demanded an enormous sum, in today's money, hundreds of millions of dollars, as a form of ransom and forced expropriation. Much of the family property was seized or sold under pressure. In France, Elizabeth de Rothschild was arrested by the Gestapo and died of typhus in a concentration camp. Art collections, palaces, and businesses were confiscated or destroyed. The same wars that had once enriched the Rothschilds now crushed parts of their legacy. After World War II, the family continued to operate, but the world had changed. States were stronger, regulations tighter, and global finance more diversified. The Rothschilds were still wealthy and influential, but they were no longer the unique central axis of European finance. In the late 20th century, nationalizations and restructurings further reduced their direct control over banking. The French branch exited traditional banking in 1980, and later, in 2003, the British and French arms joined under what is today known as the Rothschild & Co./Rothschild Group. If we add up the assets they manage and reasonably assume what may belong directly to the family, we do not get anywhere near the wild numbers that circulate online. Figures like 500 trillion are pure fantasy. Their scale today is comparable to a large, respected financial group. Significant, yes, but not a secret empire that owns the world. So why do the myths persist? Part of it is antisemitism. For centuries, Jewish bankers were demonized and turned into symbols of hidden power. Part of it is the natural human tendency to seek simple explanations for complex systems. It's easier to believe one family controls everything than to accept a messy reality of institutions, incentives, and decentralized power. And part of it is the Rothschilds themselves. In the 1970s, a bizarre and very public party at the Ferrières Chateau in France, with surreal costumes, strange masks, and unsettling imagery, fed the imagination of conspiracy theorists. Photos from that event, especially one of a Rothschild woman wearing a stag's head with diamond tears, have been recycled endlessly as supposed proof of occult rituals. Does that mean they meet in secret to decide the future of the world? No. It means extremely rich people sometimes organize extremely strange parties. Strip away the myths, and what remains? A family that played an enormous role in building the modern financial system. They helped standardize sovereign bonds. They financed railways, metros, and mining operations. They influenced wars, revolutions, and infrastructure projects. They accumulated power and then watched as history, politics, and new players diluted it. The Rothschilds are not all powerful puppet masters. They are a case study in how finance, politics, and history intertwine. And they remind us of something fundamental. Behind every conspiracy theory, there is usually a much more interesting and much more human story. If this episode helped you see beyond the myths and understand how real financial power is built and lost, share this video, hit like, and subscribe to Let's Talk About Money. It costs you nothing, but it helps us keep making the kind of content that turns headlines and legends into history you can actually understand. In the end, the most powerful asset you can have is not a secret connection or a hidden dynasty. It's the same thing it has always been: knowledge.